we are live. Let's just give Drew a few minutes.
Shift on over.
How's everything?
Good. Awesome job. Super
thanks.
clear. So hopefully a lot of our musician family can get something out of that.
I hope so.
The chat was, yeah, I can tell a lot of people like appreciate that. And it's funny, a lot of that really hits home, like looking back over the past decade. And it's really fascinating thinking about how much has changed. And wish I had known then, but the best day to have learned about this stuff was 10 years ago. And the second best day to have learned about this stuff was today. So hopefully they could get going and start moving forward on their journey.
Indeed. All right, we're getting a few people joining the stream.
So is it 6 a.m. there now?
It is 6 a.m. here. Yeah, I woke up at like 4:30.
The view from your place, though, incredible.
Oh yeah,
absolutely incredible. I'd wake up early for that view.
Yeah. Well, I did not look at that view today yet. It's been busy.
Let Drew get situated.
Yep. Yeah, everyone. For everyone who's joining now, today we're going to be talking with Drew and Trevor from the team Tempo, which just joined as an Icon P rep. I think last week, right? Yeah, I think it was last week.
And things are flying by.
Yeah. Things are flying by indeed. And then they just recently put up their proposal. And yeah, we're going to be talking more about the team, more about what they're planning to build. So it should be a good chat. Now we're just waiting for Drew here. He just asked me for the link again, so I sent it to him.
Hopping all over the various platforms.
All of them. Justin Liang says, "Hi, guys." Well, hello there.
Hello. Glad you could join us.
Oh, we here.
There he is.
There he is.
What it do?
How should we arrange this? Oh, this one's nice.
I like this.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You're beautiful. What's up, Trevor?
What's up? Awesome job. Awesome job on the Instagram Live moments ago.
It's my first time.
I'll send you some pointers. As someone who's never done it, I think valuable ideas.
Wait, do you have a podcast?
Wait, you got a podcast?
Wait, you've got a podcast?
That's right. We're only 7 minutes in, and we finally mentioned the podcast. I think it's in.
Look, 7 minutes too late, honestly.
Faking Notes podcast. This stream is sponsored by Faking Notes podcast.
Oh yeah.
Sponsored. All proceeds, Faking Notes podcast. All complaints, straight to the trash. So
Brian Lee, send them to Brian Lee. We don't.
I'm the customer support. Yes. All right. Let's start. So this is Icon Live number 2. Oh, Boutique Paul is here too. Hello, Boutique Paul.
That's good. Boutique
the legend.
Paul was
Shout
good,
out.
The legend.
It's good.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about a new team, Tempo, formed by Drew Forde and Trevor Bumgarner, 2 of my friends here. And yeah, they're like relatively new to the space. and they're also a little different from, I think, what we've come to expect from people getting into blockchain, which I think is a great thing. We need people outside the technical people. We need people outside the people who can code. We need different perspectives in order to build things that can actually, be used by non-technical people. So I'm super glad that they're here and they're thinking about a product not from the perspective of like, oh, what can I build that's super cool with this technology, but from the perspective that is, what can I build with this technology that people like myself will actually use? And Drew and Trevor are both virtuosos when it comes to music. Drew is over there with the viola. Trevor's over there with the bassoon. He's also established film score composer. So, to have perspective from the arts, which traditionally I think is an industry that is really run by the gatekeepers. To to be in that position and to understand that perspective, and then to be able to grasp, the potential of blockchain in decentralizing that power back to the people is, I think, gives them a really good perspective that a lot of people, quite frankly, just don't know about. And that's not because they're dumb. That's not because they're stupid. It's just because that's not what they do. So today we're going to be talking more about Drew and Trevor's background, and then we're going to be moving on to the vision behind what they hope to achieve with Tempo, and then we're going to give a brief overview of the proposal that Tempo recently put up for funding, and we're going to be talking about a general idea of what they're trying to do. And I am also helping out with that project from a technical perspective. So I also have a background in the arts and I have a background in technology. So it was kind of the perfect link between, the hardcore tech people and, the hardcore arts people, which Drew and Trevor are. So yeah,
You're the missing link, Brian Lee.
I am Link. I am Link. Well, Link is actually like a top crypto. So yeah,
Okay.
Chainlink.
Okay.
So
Let's go.
yeah, so before we get into all of the tempo and the proposal stuff, let's quickly do an intro. So Drew and Trevor, can you give the audience an intro about yourselves? Maybe Drew can start
You
first.
first, Trevor.
Or Trevor?
No, take it away.
Oh, why do
Take
I
it
have
away.
to?
I went first. I went first last time. This is all you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, what's up, everybody? My name is Drew Alexander Forde, also known as that little kid on the internet. I was an early stager of Instagram within the classical music niche, and I used it to build a brand of authenticity and falling in love with yourself through music on the online space. I also am a professional violist freelancer. I've performed all around the world: Singapore, Malaysia, Italy. I performed on cruise ships. Not Mars yet, but I'm working on it. Okay, Elon Musk, please.
Get us there.
Well, get us there. I also am a recording artist myself. I've produced my own music on Spotify, but I've also performed for artists that you may know: Alicia Keys, Coda the Friend. I was on Kanye West's Nebuchadnezzar opera. I've also recently done collaborations with Janelle Monáe and John Legend. John Legend's album Bigger Love, which got nominated for a Grammy. So I've been in this space for about 5 years now professionally. But now I've the one thing that I've really noticed was that disproportionately the artists at the ground, on the ground level, don't get a they don't get an amount of value that really reflects the value that they give to projects, especially over a long-term sense. And that has been a problem that has been in the music industry for many, many years. So I've been on a search through my professional life to try to find a solution to connect artists with more value that is reflective of the value that they give, not only to society, but to the businesses that make all the money. And that's me.
And Trevor.
So I'm Trevor Bumgarner, and I'm a composer. So Drew and I met way back at Juilliard. I appeared in one of his YouTubes on like how to get in there. I cracked a couple jokes. Next thing you know, 3 or 4 years later, we both wound up in Los Angeles, started a podcast. And so what I've just done over my career, I like hopping around to different types of music. I've done film scoring. I've done classical music. I've done dance, modern dance, ballet, musical theater. So what I just kind of noticed is that I just really like working with people, which is kind of rare in classical music. There's the mythos of the genius. You know, you go away, you hide out way in the hole, you come out with masterpiece, and that just didn't really settle with me. I didn't like it. I realized over time I've kind of become comfortable noticing that I work best when I'm working with others and figuring out what works for them and kind of bringing that into my space. And so, particularly over the past year, what my most recent collaboration is business and entrepreneurship, and trying to figure out what can I do for my fellow artist. Everyone we've known, particularly in the arts community, of course, the whole world has been shut down thanks to our dear friend COVID, but particularly in the States, and particularly for artists, performing artists, they were really left behind. And so it's been a particular mission of Drew and I's, and Brian's as well, to see what we can do for them. Almost every day I talk to someone who's had to just leave the field. That it's essentially it's over for them. It was not sustainable. They really were left behind. And so I think it's kind of been a clarifying moment for me that this is my next collaboration. This is where I want to take things. And just seeing what Icon can do is incredible. So I'm still very much like a newbie to this space. But what I'm very familiar with is kind of like the barriers, the hardships that artists go through. And so I kind of just see myself being able to work and collaborate with these artists and being able to work within this blockchain and Icon space to bridge the barriers and see what we can do to just help out all these various artists.
Sweet. Yeah. And I really like the point that Drew brought up about the artists provide value, but the value is often not flowed back to those people. And that's really interesting, because I think sometimes people forget just how much they interact with the arts in their day-to-day life. You know, everything from the advertisements that you see on the wall, or the music that you listen to, maybe there's a favorite podcast that you like. All of that is really classified under arts. And you're completely right. There's like, the system does not exist to like redirect the value back to those people. And it's always been very confusing to me as to why, because it seems like as a society, almost our whole like culture, our whole pop culture, you know, that's all influenced by the arts, and almost none of that value actually goes back to the people who made that stuff.
You mentioned specifically at the beginning, just like the gatekeeping. And as us going through good old classical music school, that's pretty much probably the best way to summarize the last 500 to 600 years of music is gatekeeping, which is really sad. Like, if I had to boil it down, it's not the evolution of the C major chord or something. It's like, no, people like this, and they don't know. No one makes any money from this. There's a reason why we all know about the starving artist trope. We don't know about the rich artist trope, or like, wow, I can't wait to live like them artist trope.
Yeah,
it's always been a gatekeeping industry in Los Angeles. The film industry, it's called the industry. We don't clarify it. It is the industry. It runs that entire town. It's massive. And since being in both New York and Los Angeles, it's just we've seen the disparity. There is a ton of money and a ton of value in this industry, but it never seems to make its way back to the creator. And that's something that we're really trying to tackle. So we are going up against what has been hundreds of years of leading up to this moment. And it's no longer sustainable. And particularly because of the pandemic, it's alarmingly clear. If you didn't come from money, or you haven't somehow found money before this, you're going to have to leave. And I just don't think that's like a choice that people should have to make.
Yeah.
And if we can help them out and help, keep that other option over, I think that's just like a great thing we can do.
Yeah, I think before we actually talk about the vision of Tempo, I almost think it makes more sense to outline some of the examples of why we think entertainment, and specifically the music world, is broken. So if we give people some context as to why, maybe the processes behind handling payments, or the confusion of the publishing rights or something like that, like give some background to people as to why it's something that is ripe for the disruption. So maybe Drew or Trevor, you can give a few examples of that.
Trevor, why don't you start, bro?
So one of the misconceptions of royalties is that we kind of think of it like a book. I print 100 books. I wrote the book. I'm expecting, 20, 25%. Someone buys book, I get 25% of that profit. So in music, everyone's kind of seen that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with Charlie, like there's like red lines and yarn and paperwork of some conspiracy. Yeah, well, that's how the payment structure works in music. Is that it's insanely expensive.
That's so true.
And you literally can't find your money. It disappears. There's so many different types of organizations. There's so many different types of licenses. Your copyright is separate from your payment. There's publishing rights, there's writer's shares, there's sync licenses, there's mechanical things. A different company handles your streams, then handles what goes on in the EU, then what handles what goes on in a movie theater. And then our PROs, ASCAP and BMI, they got to go out and like find the money for you and then figure out who goes to where. What is the value of someone overhearing your music streaming in a bar as opposed to on the stage? Is it different when someone performs it? Is it different when it's set to dance? Is it different when it's set to film? All this is very confusing. And what happens is, one, you don't get your money. It takes six months. If you're lucky, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, you will get what you should have got.
Okay, wait, just 1 second. I think we need to really talk about that. Like 6 to 12 months, guys, okay? 6 to 12 months. Imagine you go to your day job today. You get paid a year later.
Hey, bro, I got you.
That is the reality of what people in music are going through nowadays. Okay, so we'll talk about why that is and also what we plan to change. But for now, please continue.
If you get paid, right?
If you get paid.
If you get paid. Go ahead, Trevor. Trevor.
Like the last bit of this is, so that is so complicated. And so I'm a composer. I'm interacting with this issue often. I speak with producers. They're dealing with this because of how complicated it is. And you think about the artist of today. They need to be their own publicist. They need to be a social media expert. They have to produce their own videos. They somehow have to make the craft. The standards are so high. While yes, a lot of access in technology has like made things more affordable, that more people can get in this, but how do you stand out? You have to wear so many hats. And when it gets to the very end, your contracts, setting up licenses, who should get paid what, it's such a annoyingly painful, frustrating, confusing process that not only is it hard enough if you go through that process, most people just don't do it. The money is not there. I've done that. I'm like, it's not even worth the hassle. No one's going to play this. And what happens if it does? you will never get money on that return. You don't get your royalties. And I think that's at the core of the problem.
The vast majority of what we do on our level is we show up and we sign what is called a buyout contract. So we spend a few hours in the studio, we get paid a couple $100, and then that's it. We have no right to any royalties throughout the universe. Like a lot of these contracts that I'm talking about talk about pervasive through the end of time, throughout the universe. Like they do not want you to have any access to capital when you sign when you go as a recording artist. Now, what if that nothing burger of a score that you thought was a nothing burger, but it wins Sundance and it becomes like the next Parasite?
Yeah.
Grosses hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, please.
And everybody knows the track. Everybody's singing about it. Everybody's talking about it. It gets put into a Bridgerton, but you don't have any access to that capital. And here's the part that really blows my mind is there is no incentive for the powers that be who have the contractual power, that have the duty of maintaining databases and allocating who did what. They have no incentive to make sure the information is accurate.
Yeah.
So you could work on something, but somebody could fat finger the database and misspell your name. Or they could, conveniently forget, oh yeah, we had strings that day, and here are the string. I never got the string player's name, so I'm never going to include them in on the credits. So they can't verifiably say, hey, I played on this album.
Yeah.
Because they chose not to, or didn't think about including everybody who was in on that project. That project becomes a classic. It's all hearsay from here on out.
Yeah.
So what we want to do here at Tempo is to kind of like solve a bunch of these different problems that aren't unrelated. They actually combine to create a clusterfuck of inequality in this industry.
Yeah, and I actually have a music business background as well, so that's actually what I went to school for. And I remember when I was going through my classes, okay, and nothing made sense to me. You know, it almost seemed like the system was designed in a very, very specific way for the people who are controlling the flow of data, the flow of value, to profit as much as possible. And you know, they make it extremely confusing to like do the rights, and like you said, no one knows where the money is coming from, no one knows how the money is getting from point A to point B. And it just always struck me as something that was intentional. And I really think that's true, because like I was talking to Trevor and Drew about in a private chat, I was like, we can like send spaceships to the moon and land exactly where we want that thing to land, like exactly the right time. We know the atmosphere, you know, we know the speed at which it has to break through,
the angle.
Yeah. We can calculate all of that, and yet we don't know where the money is coming from for musicians on Earth, where, you know, the powers that be, they control the flow of capital, the flow of money, the flow of data. So, like, someone has to know somewhere. So why is it not made available? Why is it made so difficult? And it's because there's a big conflict of interest. And I think the artists have gotten exhausted and to the point of complacency. Like, what are they going to do, right? So, to expand on that point, like, I want to specifically talk about the role of what you were saying are PROs. So for people who don't know, PRO stands for, what was it? Performing Rights
Organization.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they basically are the middleman between the artist and the people who want to use the music, and they facilitate, and I use that word loosely, they facilitate the payments. You know, they sort of find out how much the artist is supposed to get paid, and then I believe they pay the artist, and they take a cut, of course. And this process takes 9 to 12 months.
It's slow. It's inefficient, and they don't even capture everything.
Yeah.
And also, there's so many other parties because, like, the PROs compared to some, like, they do some particularly good things for artists. They can kind of act as an enforcer. Like,
Yeah.
we need, like, I can't show up at every bar that plays my music. Otherwise, I'd have like an awesome life. I'd have a great time, just like going around, hanging out at all these places. But I can't physically go out and, like, shake down a bar owner for 0.002 cents for them playing a second of my track behind a commercial. But, like, they go out and do that. But what I think we really highlight is just like that duration.
Yeah.
And what in just conversations with Brian and Drew, just the look on our faces when it's kind of like everyone just accepts it for the way things are, which is insane. And the moment we said, Brian's like, wait a minute, are you telling me it takes a year and you might get paid? They do surveys for certain industries. Some things they can be pretty precise. Other things, you think of your high school band or your college wind ensemble. They're playing a band piece. They just have to survey that. They literally just take a guess. It's a political poll on your future. If they didn't poll the right person, you get no money. And it's kind of just this insane thing. And it reminds me of, like, with copyright, it is a very inherently confusing thing. They just recently tried to reproach the, like, 1976 Copyright Act, like the last time we thought about this. How much has changed since 1976?
Right.
Come on. And they aptly named it the MMA, the Music Modernization Act, but it reminds me more of like MAA, where you're getting beat up in the ring, because that kind of is what it feels like. It's inherently complicated. The decisions that are made around this copyright situation aren't made by artists either. And it just seems like, in typical artist fashion, we're just yielding concessions constantly. And we don't want to have to handle it. It's a problem.
I think it's important to make the point that, the system is archaic, but at one point in time, it did make sense. So back in 1970s, I don't know what year, but, back in the old days before streaming, before all of these different things, maybe there was an actual advantage to having a label and having, these different entities facilitate the stuff, because the tools just did not exist for you to directly, make your content and distribute it to people around the world. But now the tools do exist, right? Like, all of the Macs that you buy nowadays come with the software that you can use to make you don't have to go to the studio now. You can just do it all at home. You can distribute it online. You just upload it. So I feel like over the past few decades, there's been slight adjustments that are sort of like a band-aid to just try to, like, use the old system in a way. Let's keep the core as what it is. Let's strap on this band-aid, and then it'll work for the next few years. So there's been so many of these band-aids, but no one has really had the foresight to be like, wait, the core functions of all of these gatekeepers aren't exactly valid now. And how that kind of is derived in the real world, like what we see in the real world now, is sort of a struggle of power, because people are starting to know, to see that maybe these entities don't have to exist. If I can directly distribute out to my audience, why do I need to go through 3 different parties, each taking a 15% cut? Why can't I do it all myself? And the answer is, it's almost getting to the point where you really can. But there's a few things missing. There's, I think there's like the copyright side of things, and also the payment side of things. I think like so much of that payment stuff is still tied to the traditional finance system. So you get a lot of the overhead of, like, the processing, the administrative tasks, that it's still difficult to, not get a lot of your money cut away. But now with blockchain and crypto coming around, I think, as we'll talk later, like, there's suddenly, this new technology that can be applied. And I think something really special can happen from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We can change the world, y'all. One thing that I wanted to talk about was the tokenization of digital assets through NFTs on the Ethereum chain. And I literally have a meeting with an artist on Tuesday who I follow on Instagram who just sold her first. She's a digital artist. She makes surrealist digital photography for album art, for artists and whatever. She's brilliant. Her name is Shaylin. SMW All Day is her Instagram handles. Check her out. She sold her first art after learning about NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain and made her first purchase. Made her first sale just last week. And this space is moving really fast. But I'm like, the idea that you could create a piece of art and then sell that art like as if you're selling a product, and then have your value as an artist increase, or the value of that art independent of you or dependent upon you increase in value through resale over time. Being able to get a kickback of that appreciation and of that sale in the future in perpetuum really unlocks the ability for artists to just massively monetize their art, especially in a world where there are incredible artists out there making incredible work and seeing nothing for it. I think it's brilliant, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, part of the reason for that, I think, is the lack of a way or a standard for, the rights behind these pieces to interact with things that are online, right? Like with music publishing, a lot of that is still done on paper. So, which means there's no online platform that can reliably, in like a standardized way, parse the contents of the contract. But like, this is like one thing that we're trying to work on, right? Where if you're able to put that initial foundational layer of who owns what into a format, into a system that can be, parsed by smart contracts and all these different things, suddenly it opens a lot more use cases, or for, how efficiently the capital can flow, and things along those lines. So, the whole idea of putting this information online seems obvious, but for some reason, it's all still done on paper. So it's
I like my paper, bro.
Paper.
Come on. My fiat currency. That's what I'm all about, kid.
There's so many wild stories. So just for those out there, like, it's just now moving to digital, to where you can go look up how much you made, your kind of like royalty splits over that several month waiting period. But even up until recently, there are stories. For an example, the composer of the Seinfeld theme, the sweet little slapping bass line. Bingo. What they would do is, he had so many performances, and they used to have to deliver him a filing cabinet. So just imagine you're there, you're waiting, and FedEx would wheel up, and they would deliver you a filing cabinet because they had printed out all these things, all the various channels, its various occurrences, and you just get a filing cabinet. Like, that's insane. And then they just gave up. They just told this composer, they're like, hey, how about this? We're sick of mailing you a filing cabinet of your statements from just this theme, and we're sick of counting this. What if we just give you like $2 million and we'll like stop surveying it? Like just kind of like an example of just like kind of like the insanity of this. And as other people are missing out things, it really can be handled by the technology, to where you can get an accurate assessment of how your music's being distributed. And like, that's just what kind of blows my mind, is because of how kind of like difficult and frustrating this process is, and you have to put in a lot of time to really see how it's going to work in order to capitalize on it. The same person could write the same piece, and in the parallel universe where they went through some of this process, put in a couple hours, they could be getting thousands of dollars over the course of their lifetime off of that one piece of intellectual property. And if they didn't go through this process, which is most often the case, they'd be getting $0. Same product being played in the same places, performed in the same places, $0, passive income for the rest of their life. It's confusing. Artists don't like it. We don't fully understand it. People who work at these companies don't fully understand it. People commenting on Facebook don't fully understand it. I don't fully understand it. And I think that's at the core of the problem is that we talk to entertainment lawyers, we talk to various lawyers in this field, and it doesn't quite seem that they can fully like grasp it either, because the totality of it's intentionally confusing and it's prohibitive, and it's a little archaic, and it doesn't have to be this way. And so this is with our first project proposal of Project Coda. It's the beginning of the end. We're going straight there. This is a really big pain point that I think is just going to be fully served through Icon, because of just like all the advantages it has about speed and cost and simplicity. Yeah. Instead of running through and going in and say, hey, our mission is just to purely educate artists about all these various systems. It's like, what if we can do that, but also just make it easier? You don't have to go through this. We can set up ways to make this as intuitive as possible, so that instead of becoming your own lawyer, your own rights lawyer, you can just keep making music, and within 30 minutes, boom, you're set up. The rest of your life, you're going to be pulling in income from your art.
So, dude, I don't know what to tell you. I have my rights on the blockchain. Like, I made it. It's time stamped. It's here. Pay me.
Pay me, right?
You know.
And there you go. It's done. Yeah. Collect the check every day.
Yeah, like just to expand on the scope of the project a bit. It's, as with many things that are trying to, topple the existing systems, it's not going to be an easy road. It's going to be difficult, and there's going to be many stages, I think. And the initial issue that we're addressing is not the problem of, some random marching band somewhere plays your song. They don't report it. You don't get paid. That's not something.
And then you beat them upside the head.
That's not something that we can control, right? Because people like to think that blockchain solves everything, but at the end of the day, the blockchain is not gonna like drive up to that school and say like, you played this music. Pay us, right? That's not what.
Someone else work on that proposal,
right?
Yeah. That's a new P. That's a new
the Terminator
stuff.
Icon Terminator.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, but the issue that we are trying to fix is the representation of ownership. That's like the foundational thing. Because again, like you said, the industry is built now on data that might be correct. So if we can make it where the data is correct and have the data be accessible by by all of these different payment platforms, by whoever wants to integrate with the underlying ownership layer that is correct, that opens up many use cases. So we're not trying to solve the problem of unpaid royalties, at least not initially. So what we are solving is just how the rights are represented. We don't feel that people have to go to a lawyer just to draft up this person owns 25%, this person owns 25%. There's these things called split sheets when you do a song, which basically assigns a different percentage of the ownership to different parties. And many people do that on a piece of paper, which means that there's a few things that can go wrong, right? It's like if someone is trying to type that into a payment platform, maybe they accidentally mistype something. If someone again is typing, they might actually like misspell the name or something like that, and that person does not get paid. So by taking out the paper part of that, by having all of that on a time-stamped blockchain layer that everyone involved has to agree to in order for that timestamp to happen, then that's like a really good way of saying, okay, this agreement happened at this time. As we all know, blockchain cannot be changed. Once you're in the future, you're not going to change the past. It's timestamped. It clearly shows who owns what. And that's where we are starting, trying to rethink the foundation of ownership of the creative works. This certainly applies to music. It can apply to many different things as well. So that's like the layer that we're trying to do. And the second thing we're trying to do is to make a smart contract that allows for efficient payments that will integrate with the ownership layer. So you have instant payments. You don't have to wait for years, months, and it's exciting, man. Because if you think about it, like your approach to your work is going to be very different if you know that you're going to be paid within the next day or within the next week. It brings a lot more certainty in your life. It reduces stress, which in turn might actually help you boost the quality of your work, because you don't have to worry, like, am I going to get paid in a year, like a year and a half? So
Here's another
yeah,
thing, Brian. Can I add to that?
yeah,
Because oftentimes we artists, this is going to help artists in general. Like, once again, I'm a string player, and oftentimes I'm not credited or I'm credited incorrectly for work. In this use case, it's going to make sure that the conversation of equity stake is actually had, because
yeah,
oftentimes I'm asked to come to the studio and compose something off the top of my head. But the moment you say, okay, so like, where's the split sheet? Can I add to it? It creates this weird energy in the room. But if you have a smart contract up front, it's like, hey, we are going to go into the studio, and whatever comes from this, you're going to get this much, you're going to get this much, you're going to get this much, and it's all in a smart contract. It changes the order of operations
yeah,
of how music is created. And I think that will be so healthy and so helpful, because it'll be transparent and people can honestly create new workflows within the creative space that gets rid of a lot of this predatory behavior that you see from labels and things like that.
And another thing too, like further piggybacking on that, is we can't topple systems or change things without equity these days. And I'm talking about equity among partners, not necessarily even the equity of the pieces. We need fairness, we need transparency, and whoever sets up these contracts, it's the person at the very end of the process, or the person who paid for it. The producer of that album might not know every little component that went into it. We have so many people contributing to these albums these days. I mean, just look at the back of the album. They were always contributing in the past. They were just never even listed. So while we had everyone complains like, oh, why did it take 8 writers to write Justin Bieber's Baby 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 Up? And I'm like, well, you need 1 writer per baby. But
What if we
in the
said
old
it
days, they
again?
just didn't even give them credit at all. So
yeah,
it's not really like things have changed. Also, like Brian mentioned earlier, the technology and access, with almost no money, with $100, you can go out and create something with more skill, with more finesse, like at a higher quality than what cost you $1 million back in the day.
yeah,
So in these negotiations with these contracts, they're uncomfortable. Artists know that their art is valuable, but our whole career is kind of built off of like doubt and perfectionism. It's this confusing battle to where I have to fight for myself. What I do is valuable. Also, I'm not perfect. I'm not there yet. I got to keep fighting for it. And there's this constant disassociation with like, oh, well, if I put X number of dollar on my art, is that what I'm valued with? But, and so there's people with multiple degrees, highly skilled, running around, commanding nickels on the hour for what they're doing. It's an uncomfortable thing, and it's expensive. So why does it have to be that way? If there's 5 people in the room and we want to split it 5 ways, why must I go through a lawyer at the end and have a back and forth? So as far as even crediting, what we like about this too is that it can be done very simply. Why Drew is not getting credited on this is, one, the person at the end who's making the contract doesn't know Drew even played on it. He wouldn't have thought about it. And even if he did, they don't want to. It's like, wait, he's not getting any money from this. He's just like getting credited on it. Why would we put someone in the contract that's not getting money? That's something. It's just a bit of information that can change someone's careers. I don't know how many times to go on Twitter, knowing our producer friends or knowing our songwriter friends, they're like, hey, I worked on this thing, I'm not credited, all the time. So even beyond just exchange of money, which I think this helps it simpler, be a simpler process. It's also like allowing equity and like shared and transparency of just everyone who contributed should get credit. We can say it right there, whether or not they necessarily have like a voting stake in that song or they're going to be getting a percentage. They can point to, I contributed to this art. I was a part of the process. And there's no disincentivization to, oh, we don't want to include that person because it's going to cost us another $600 for the lawyer to review and double check and like mail them a copy. And we got to be secretive about this to the film, production company, because they have Oscar rules that prevent how many people contributed to the music. Like, there's all these just insane things that don't have to be this way, that can be solved very simply through a contract to where everyone can kind of vote on it. It keeps it transparent because it's simple, but yet securely sound. We are talking to lawyers, to legal scholars, to really make sure that this is fully kind of bulletproof and confident that what we can do with a couple clicks, someone can have a fully fleshed out, ironed out contract that's going to pay them and credit them as they deserve in under an hour.
One thing we're always told as artists is like, we don't really have a budget, but it'll be great exposure, right? It'll be amazing exposure.
Exposure coin. So.
Exposure coin. See, the way I would retort is like, well, exposure is going to be what I die of if I can't pay my rent. So let's actually talk about money. Here's the deal, though. If you have a database, if you have like a blockchain that tracks who did what, regardless, right? And you can always go back and check it. And there's no central body who decides who gets to be a part of this. If you are part of the ecosystem, if you're a part of the contract, you're part of the process and creation, you get credit. That's some exposure that people can actually build on. Yeah. But if you go do a concert once and you get paid in pizza, that's not going to really help you build your career in a significant way.
Yeah, that's really funny. I used to do shows as well, and people were always saying, oh, I can't pay you cash, but we can buy you lunch. And I was just like, can you just give me the cash that you were going to use to buy the lunch with? And, I'd rather take that. But that's so right. Like, the database and the access to data is not controlled by the actual people who are creating the work. So this is the problem. And, the project that we are proposing will address this problem. And it's kind of like, I would say over the past year, the emergence of decentralized finance has kind of proved that people do like to take control back of their assets, back of their capital. And for a songwriter, their capital is the song. And, we've seen this trend where, like, we were just talking to Drew about this on his live stream like an hour ago, where people are taking the money out of their bank accounts and then putting on platforms that they can use to lend by themselves, bypass the bank. Why does the bank need to, tell me who, like, take my money, lend it to someone, and then give me nothing back, when I can do it myself? I can go on this platform, lend it out, someone will borrow it, I get 8% interest a year. Stuff like that is appealing to people because it is giving the power back to them. And I don't see any reason why the same model would not work for the arts. I think people do want control of their data. They want to be able to vote on updates to the ownership of their song, you know, and not go through some label, some lawyer says like, maybe this isn't a good idea. Who knows what his interest is, right? Maybe he's incentivized to screw you over because of some backdoor deal that you don't know about. That intransparent kind of thing should not be happening, and yet it is. So by giving the power to like manage the ownership in a tamper-proof way, you know, a smart contract has no emotional bias, you know, like if like the lawyer is in love with the person that is your that you're trying to sue, then maybe he'll act in a certain way. That like all of this stuff has been time and time again. It's been proved that like the human being does not always make the best decision or the right one, right? So, and when there's so much at stake on the line, like people's livelihoods, do we really want a system that's not transparent, that is fraught with gatekeepers that demand, you know, cuts of your payments? You know, maybe they demand payment for access to change the database. You know, just the entire system is really due for an overhaul. So I want to get your thoughts on that, and then I want to quickly just talk about why we want to build this on Icon versus Ethereum and all these different platforms. And also, if anyone has any questions, please ask them in the chat. We're gonna pick a few good ones, and we will send some ICX to you if we pick your question, if you ask a good question. So yeah, what are your thoughts on what I just said, Drew and Trevor?
So one of the things I think about too, because this is going to be coming out in stages, there's so many ways we can progress. There's so many problems for us to tackle in the arts world, but it's because of how prohibitively expensive, how frustrating it is to talk about money, and also so much is done in mystery. And I think what you had mentioned, kind of the human mind, it's scientifically proven to just not do a good job of thinking long term. That's why we get Social Security. Like, we set up a system. It's like, hey, we know you're bad, but we're going to try to give you something in the future. It's like, we know you're not good at this, so we're just going to like forcibly have you do something for your own good. And you know, to some degree that helps out. But with these artists, I don't know how many times I've worked on a project that we're uncomfortable. Is this even going to go anywhere? And so they don't make the contract. They don't have those discussions, because why on earth would you end a relationship and fight over something to death over a song that might never get released, that might never make a single nickel? I've had situations before. I'm glad I've fought for that, because as everyone knows, you learn by getting screwed over once, and then twice, and then 3 times, and then 10 times. But eventually you learn, and you start to like read those contracts that you just keep signing away. And it's like, wait, hold up. I've spent, if I have, for instance, a film, I'm going to score this film, and it's a 3-month turnaround. I've spent 1.5 months to 2 months going back and forth on the contract before I ever wrote a note. And I'm glad I did, because we got what we want. But that is such a huge hassle. And these people were very on top of it. They were great to work with. They were not being a great collaboration. But that's half the time I could have been writing music of something that could be simply laid out through this system. And because of how painful that is, I'm on the phone with a lawyer. It's just like I had to have a lot of knowledge to be able to come in there and to ask for what I wanted. That's expensive to go through the process for something that might never return. So the easier we make it on the contract side, on just the whole process of like registering your piece, on the payment side, we are creating more income for artists and creating more art. We're creating more artists and more income for artists. Imagine if back in 1976, things were set up with some foresight when they were setting up the Copyright Act. We couldn't have projected it, but how many artists between now and then just didn't exist, just didn't get in there? It was unaffordable. They were 1 year away from their break. They're 3 years into their career, and there just wasn't enough there. They were waiting too long for that royalty check. They didn't register their piece. They didn't register that album. They signed away their rights to their music and their creation because they didn't know better. We've all heard the stories. Some of our greatest artists we've heard, almost all the top artists you can list off bump into
Kanye, Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift, tale as old as time. It's a problem. And I think with the emergence of blockchain, and particularly with Icon and what it has to offer, this is the first time in a long time I've been very excited and can actually see, wait a minute, something is finally here that can enact this change.
I couldn't agree with you more, Trevor. I think that, Brian, you said a little earlier, the democratization of musical creation with tools provided by ecosystems like Apple provide a lower barrier of entry for people to create art, whether that is visual art, like when it comes to YouTube videos or photography or music creation. The barriers are much lower. Therefore, there's a larger percentage of people that have the ability to try to become artists, right?
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, getting into the ecosystem of creating value for yourself is really difficult. Also, when you are on the internet creating digital art, somebody can literally just copy the ones and zeros and pawn it as their own, right? They can put it out as their own. So how would you ever be able to retain ownership over whatever you create? I think that this is it. Like I've, as an artist myself, when I first learned about this, like, I think it was 2016 or 17, I had just graduated from Juilliard, just got my master's in viola performance. And I didn't know a goddamn thing about, and I apologize for my potty mouth, but I didn't know a goddamn thing about how music was made or how money was made or PROs. I had to have a successful group named Black Violin. I had a meeting with them in Chinatown at a rooftop bar in the middle of the night after one of their shows, and they sat me down and told me about PROs. I had never heard about PROs, or I'd only gone to like one lunch and learn at Juilliard where they kind of talked about, you need to sign up with a PRO, and you also need to copyright, and you also need to like keep all these certificates on file. There are so many steps you have to go through that have nothing to do with making the art. And your job as an artist is to make the best art. So you need to practice. How do you do all of these different things? You need to delegate. You need to pay people to do these things for you. Well, if you don't make any money, how can you pay these people to do these things for you? So it just creates this vicious cycle of having to supplicate to a label that will advance you $1 million, $2 million in exchange for all of your rights, all of your publishing, or a huge portion of your publishing, huge portion of like, your royalties. So we're trying to enable the opportunity for artists to have a decentralized platform where they know that they can prove that they have ownership over the creation of their art. And that is the first step. And from there, we can begin to try to solve a lot of other different problems. But I think that is like the core root of everything. And ICX, because where I was going with that is ICX, the capability of like 9,000 transactions per second is huge. Like YouTube has 400 hours of content being uploaded every minute.
Yeah.
At some point at adoption, you're going to need a fast network to deal with the demand. And I think ICX is perfectly positioned for that.
Yeah, so you just went on a really great rant. I really appreciate that. I think that was a lot of great information and insight that people outside just would never know about. So really thank you for that. And before we hop into the questions, we just want to talk briefly about, why Icon. There's so many different smart contract platforms out there. And so I've been in Icon for a while. Like, how did Drew and Trevor here end up on this podcast talking about building a product on Icon? So, like, when you're thinking about smart contract platforms now, the number one choice, I think, or the number one most recognized platform is Ethereum, right? And we're trying to build something that is accessible, both from a financial perspective as well as a user experience side of things. So, as we all know, Ethereum is extremely clogged up right now. Just to make a transaction is probably like $8 to $10. If you want to do, a trade or a swap, that's probably I don't know, like 60% of the value that you're trying to swap. I think I saw on Twitter that someone was trying to make a transaction. The transaction fee was like $1,000. So, who is
Woo,
going to do
baby.
that? Like, I always say, like, Ethereum right now is really a highway that is reserved for the whales, right? The whales, there's certainly a lot of money to be made because the access to the capability to do these swaps is priced out. A lot of people simply cannot pay the fee. So you have a very exclusive set of people who are able to interact with Ethereum, and that kind of goes against the whole point of blockchain, where you're trying to decentralize the power and like whoever wants to use it can use it. But with Ethereum, with Bitcoin to a certain extent, though Bitcoin is not a smart contract platform, but with Ethereum, it's, yeah, everyone can use it as long as you can afford it, which for many artists might not be the case. Like if they wanted to, uh, if if they wanted to do the use case that we're trying to tackle and trying to build this on Ethereum, it's going to be very expensive. And when something like this is expensive, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of it because we're trying to make it less expensive. So that's like one reason why we're on Icon, and the other aspect of it is just the really fast block time. So when we're trying to copyright, like when we're trying to timestamp something, when we're trying to like create a token that that represents the ownership of an asset, you don't want the person to have to wait around for like 10 minutes for that to happen, because they'll think like, should I click the button again? Or like, what should I do? Should I like hit the back button?
Don't refresh. Don't
Yeah.
refresh.
Right, like because there's like a property of the blockchain, right, where if you click it again, it might create another timestamp, and then you're like, that's just a UX nightmare. And that's the thing with that's the thing now. Like when I tried to do a swap like a few weeks ago, I was trying to swap from one token to another on Ethereum, it's just like pending for like half an hour. And from a UX perspective, like how can we expect something like this when in the past decade, all of the things that we interact with, like our computers, our smartphones, like the one of the most important things is like the threshold of like the time between you press a button and it does something. When you press something on your phone, when you press a button, you expect the function to be done immediately. You don't expect to hit the button and then pending. Like if you're trying to get an app open, you click it, it's pending. Well, what does pending mean?
You
Like
know what I found with YouTube though?
what?
YouTube does it really well, where it does it in the background. And while you've uploaded your video, or you're uploading
Yeah.
your video and it's processing, you can put in the information.
Yeah.
And I think the UX perspective, like that's, if it ever gets to a point where it takes longer, that time could be spent putting in the correct data. If it's if we get to a point where we're doing more than 9,000,
Yeah.
more than 9,000
Well,
inquiries. But
the thing with that is that when you're uploading a video to YouTube, the asset already exists, but when you're trying to timestamp something, that you have to input all of the data first. So it's
yeah,
the user experience is limited by how fast the
okay.
action can be. And in terms of like block time, the block time on Icon is somewhere between 1 to 2 seconds. which
Ooh.
I think is perfectly fine for, the time you expect to press a button and the time you expect to see like, oh, something has gone through just fine. It's not, you click it, you wait half an hour, maybe more. It just is pending. So that's like another reason why we chose Icon is for the fast block time, because something like this, the target market that we're trying to build for, they're not very technical. They're not going to understand why something like this is pending for an hour. Because the whole point of it was, to speed things up. Like an hour, they can hop on the phone with someone and talk about their contract. No, it has to be really fast. And the other reason is just the work that is going on in Icon with regard to the user experience is completely opposite from so many projects that I see out there, where people are trying to build products that can be used by normal people. And I almost think in Ethereum and many of these other smart contract platforms, the developers are almost purposely trying to make things more technical, which might satisfy their ego, but how are people actually going to use this in the real life? So, for example, just the idea of your identity on the blockchain. Most platforms out there just assume that people are going to be comfortable with their identity being a random string of numbers. That's what an identity on a blockchain is. Like they expect people, they're going to download this Chrome extension, they're going to put in their private key, they're going to choose the right random string of numbers as their identity, and they're going to log in. No. Who is going to do that? My brother can't do that. My mom can't do that. Sometimes I can't even do that. So what does that say? I like how Icon is thinking about these things, and the people involved in the community are building the products that are trying to abstract away all of that blockchain complexity. So, there's a product called Bridge, which I think we'll be making use of, where it's kind of like offloading the identity management towards a secondary layer. So you no longer have to log in with your random string of numbers. You log in with your email address, which most people know how to use. And you log in with your address, it sends you a message, you click on the link and it logs you in. That's how Slack works as well. Like if people can use Slack, they'll be able to use our platform. And that's really powerful, and that's a great thing to see, that there is a huge focus on the user experience side of things that I just don't see in Ethereum. I don't see in Cardano. I don't see in like Tron. I don't see in Polkadot. All these different smart contract platforms are falling into a trap where I think the developers assume everyone has a certain level of technical skill, and that's a very dangerous road.
That's what kept me from getting into this ecosystem for so long. Trevor?
Yeah, and even second in that, like one of the things I've loved since you had mentioned like where, and I see the questions too about like where this came up. It was so Drew and I have this podcast, the Faking Notes podcast, where we interact with a bunch of different artists. We are talking directly to the users. They tell us about our problems. And we kind of see who's very technical, who's not. And it's like, what are the issues? What have been like preventing them from taking the next step? Or how much effort did they have to put in to just learn that little thing that helped them take the next step? And so we brought on our technical advisor, Brian, kind of came through, and it was an amazing conversation. So in his episode, towards the end, you can actually hear live the ideation and kind of continuation and fleshing out various versions. So it's on record. It's on the blockchain. Coming up with this
the podcast blockchain.
This type of idea. But the thing that really sticks to me and it excites me about Icon in particular was what Brian just mentioned, is the community. Thanks to the glories of Twitter, I see like ICX capitalists and other people I'm now following. I asked Brian, what am I going to do? I need to learn all this stuff. I'm just now getting interested in finance after 1 year. This is a new area. I was used to thinking about C major, and that was my biggest problem of the week. And now I'm trying to understand NFTs. And so over the past couple of weeks, getting familiar with the technology, getting familiar with the community, that's what inspires me. That's why I care so much about artists. That's why I like to collaborate with other artists. I love the sense of community. That's why I stick around. It's not trying to figure out how to manipulate C major in various ways. I like the people in there, in the community. And that's something I've recognized in Icon, is that it is all this mission focused things, trying to make the world better, also trying to make it simpler and make it more equitable. And for artists, my goal beyond just general education, what I said earlier, is that I want them to be aware of these things, but I want to make their life simpler. Whenever everyone complains about, college, why didn't they teach me this? Why didn't they teach me about tech? It's because they need to teach you about 20 other things. We all needed to learn 1,000 things, and you could only kind of choose 20-ish, and then eat a bunch of pizzas for 4 years. So like with this, it's like we want them to be aware of this, but we really do want to make it as simple as possible, as affordable as possible. And I think not just from what we're trying to do on Icon, like the whole community is really seemed to be built around that. It's making the platform, the infrastructure better, and making the outreach better. Speaking with Brian, he's been great to explaining things to me and being the voice to the music community. And I think that's what the three of us really want to try to do, is to, it's like we come to, like, here's our problems, here's what we're thinking about it, here's what we can do to help solve this. And what is that going to do is, I'm not really set out to be necessarily like an industry disruptor, or like that's the buzzword of the day. What I'm really interested in is like a community creator. With this access, we're going to have more artists, more music, freeing up more people from the day job they might not want to go out and create, or just from leaving the field entirely, or never even getting into the field in the first place. If this is easier, if artists can get returns on their hard-earned work without having to learn the intricacies of every little bit of technology that they use. We already do that in our real lives. Yeah. Most people can't explain how money works. It's insane. Like when you really dig down, we don't know how electricity works, but yet I reap the benefits every day. And so I want to make it that simple for artists so that they can really focus on their art, and we just have more artists and arts in general.
Preach, 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 preach. All right. Do you guys want to jump into the questions here?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Cool.
Let's do it.
Ka Hin Wong says, do you think that this could potentially renovate the music industry and fully bring an end to artist exploitation? Well, I think that what we're doing is the seed, for a new system of thinking. Because when you say exploitation, that kind of assumes that there is a party here that is exploiting the artist, and that is the case. That's like the gatekeeper, all of these entities in between the artists and their money. These people are acting in their self-interest instead of the artist's self-interest. But by moving to a peer-to-peer system, where the number of the people in between you and the money are reduced or removed completely, that by itself will remove exploitation. Because like, what is exploitation, right? It's just a behavior that is influenced by self-interest, that is not in line with the thing that you're trying, that you say
conflicting
you support.
self-interest.
Yeah. So by removing the emotional side of things, the conflict of interest, I think it's a good start. I don't know if it's going to renovate the industry, because it's certainly it's been around for so long. It's going to be hard to uproot. It's going to be hard to change. But I think, as we're seeing with DeFi, the new decentralized system can live alongside the traditional system. And over time, the market is going to decide which one is worth more, So
y'all love that laissez-faire-ish, right?
Yeah.
You provide more value to the consumer, then we will win. And I truly believe that that's where we're going. We will be a fundamentally better decision for the artist to choose us and our services than the existing format. So either the existing format and the institutions, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, Brian.
No,
I
no,
got
no.
super
Yeah,
passionate.
yeah.
Like the existing vanguard, they're either going to have to change their policies to compete or they will die. But at the end of the day, it's going to be good for the end. It's going to be good for the artist. It's going to be a better system for the artist in general.
Yeah. And we also have to think that there's actually many type of people in the arts. You know, there are some like big names who might always go with the existing system, you know, because that's just more cost efficient for them in terms of maybe scale, you know, and those entities in between may actually give those people real value because those people are able to afford to pay for it. But for the people who are trying to do it all themselves, um, you know, I feel like that is the market that we're going to be targeting at first because those people are the ones who are thinking about the future, you know. Those people are the ones who are, instead of trying to partner with existing brands, they're building their own brand. They're building their own blog, they're building their own newsletter, they're building their own community, which I feel like is where this might end up going, you know, how to incentivize your community um, to help grow yourself further. And I think that's what we're trying to tackle. You know, it's not really uh we're not trying to improve the industry. I feel like we're more trying to like uh rethink it, you know. Because it's going to be hard to improve. If we try to improve it, if we go to all of these entities and say, "Hey, we want to help you with blockchain," they'll be like, LOL, right? Like we're all set here. You know, we don't need your help. You know, we've been exploiting people for 50 years. It's working. It's fine.
We're
You know.
good.
So maybe this will start as an alternative way of thinking, and the people who are in line with the way that we think will be the ones who will use it first. You know, and just like we saw in DeFi maybe last year, uh, everyone thought it was a scam. Now we have huge funds who are investing into DeFi. We have like Coinbase based on their recent IPO paperwork and stuff. They're pretty bullish on that as well, which is pretty cool because they're kind of the opposite of DeFi. So even Coinbase sees the value of decentralizing the power. And yeah, so to answer that question, you know, I don't know if it'll bring an end to the exploitation of the artist, but I think if we build the foundation for that conversation to happen is already a huge start.
They'll just no longer. We want to make it so simple and so equitable and so profitable that artists won't have to choose exploitation.
Yeah,
That's it.
The
that's
freedom
the
to
choice
choose. How about that?
ICX Capitalist, what initially brought you to the idea to digital ownership of music with blockchain technology? Well, it all came down to the podcast episode, right? So if you didn't listen to the podcast episode, I'll link it in the description after this. But we had a conversation on Drew and Trevor's podcast, the Faking Notes podcast. We were talking about blockchain, and I was very surprised to hear that many of this is still conducted on paper. And when things are conducted on paper, there's no layer that a computer can use to understand the terms and act based on those terms. And so that was like one thing. And the other thing was the power of tokenization to effectively and efficiently split up the ownership of an asset into different shares of tokens and to transfer the token across the network to different people for a very low cost, which maybe in the real world, if you wanted to transfer the how much you own of a song to someone else, that's going to be a big cost. It's going to be a huge thing. You have to do the paperwork. But if it's all tokenized, it's much more streamlined, and you're almost making ownership of an asset into a liquid asset itself, which is super cool because you can like borrow against it, you can lend it out, and do all these kinds of cool things. It's really a rethinking of like the liquidity of the ownership aspect of something, and blockchain really allows for that. I can't think of anything else that would let you do something like that. So
and with like music just as an industry in general, back to the beginning of this live stream, it's just rooted in history. It clings to history. Particularly in classical music, where Drew and I come from. We celebrate 250th birthdays.
Right.
Beethoven. Last year was Beethoven, and everyone had to play Beethoven. And maybe if blockchain works out, we can all make it to 250 and show up at our own 250th birthday celebrations. But like with that, like icon community, get on.
Get on longevity.
Yeah. get on. Yeah.
Let's
like,
decentralize age.
Decentralized death. Like it's everyone. Yeah. But like with that in mind, it's rooted into the core of the institution itself. It is highly resistant to change. It's always been like that, unfortunately. And that's even more so than almost any other art. The MoMA, Modern Art Museums, pride and praise contemporary art. It'll wind up on the front page of the New York Times. They'll put it up there. If you want to hear a contemporary piece of music, turn to page 17, maybe. It might be back there. It is the piece played like somewhere after, in between the intermission. It's never the first or last piece. It's somewhere in there. It's snuck in there. You're given 7 minutes. The other hours for Beethoven. It's not well supported. And that kind of goes across everything else we're out. There's all this money. The music industry, depending on how many metrics you look at, is like $160 billion industry. The performing arts industry is a $33 billion industry. Live industry, there's so much money, and yet we think of the starving artist trope. I'm working on another company called Concertize, and I'm trying to figure out how to have more concerts, because just like the mystery of, wait, why does it take 1 year for me to get my royalty payments, and I'm waiting around a year for like $13? Why is it so hard to put on a concert? So there's all these really aha moments, and we've been recently like thinking of like, what are the possibilities of this technology and what can change? We've been interacting with all of our musician friends, all of our artist friends, all of our colleagues, and just like asking questions like, what if you got paid day of when your music got played? Or for instance, in concerts, like what if you could perform every day? And that just blows their mind. Yeah, it's because that right now that's not an option. People prepare for 9 months for one show when they could play it every day. But why? Because it's a hassle. There's all these little things that kind of built up. Why can't you record that album? Because you need $50,000 to get into the studio, to pay everyone, to even get your ideas on wax. The barriers to entry are kind of endless. Even if we ran on Ethereum, Brian's mentioning just the sheer cost and the time that gets to the point where it's really no different than some of the existing systems, which is also, again, a huge problem. When you're dealing with streams, no one's directly taking ownership of that. It's 0.0083%, something really low. And so with that, like there's an inherent problem in the finances of that. If it takes $8 to $10 per transaction, you're never getting 0.0083% of your money. It's just not going to work out that way. Yeah. So we need something that's fast and efficient and affordable, rather than how it exists now, which is where you have to go to each of these different sites. You need to go to your PRO. You need to go to your sync license person. You need to go to the CD baby, just like all these copyrights. And you have to pay as a subscription fee or a registration fee of your art. So already again, we don't know if that piece of art will ever make money. So it's a real risk and a barrier to drop $150 just to claim the rights to the copyright of the piece, which you already own.
Yeah, exactly. And we all know how much a transaction on Icon costs. You know, it's a few cents. So if you can build in the contract terms and the split of the tokens, it's very cheap compared to what you would be paying in the traditional world. So Nicholas Ben Savenga, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Do we see a lot of blockchains within ecosystem jumping into music? How can ICX provide the highest quality among the other chains? So there are a lot of projects working on blockchain. I mean, working on the music with blockchain, but I think that they're coming at it from the wrong angle. If you see that most of these projects have their own streaming platforms, which is not what needs to be solved, because the streaming platform is on the other side of the coin, where that's like the consumption side. But even if you fix the consumption side, the underlying ownership side is still broken. So it's just another band-aid. So, and all of these platforms are building on Ethereum, which that decision in itself sort of contradicts the idea of efficient payments, etc. Because we all know there's no way to make an efficient payment on Ethereum. You're not going to win on speed. You're not going to win on fees. So why are you building on Ethereum when you're trying to pitch this to like an artist? So yes, there are a lot of blockchains that are working on music, but yeah, they're all doing this like streaming platform thing, and I just don't see the use case there, because I don't see anything wrong with Spotify. I don't see anything wrong with Apple Music. Maybe their back end plumbing for dispersing the payments to the artist can improve, but that can't improve until there's essentially the thing that we're trying to build, right? We're trying to build the thing on the tokenization of the ownership. Once that is in place, once the plumbing is there, then they can do whatever they want with it. So yes, there are a lot of things in blockchain music. I think most of them are either gimmicks or coming at it from the wrong angle. You guys have anything else to add on that?
Brian, I couldn't agree more.
That's it.
I think that's literally it. And I think that when you are talking about successful businesses, the angle at which you attack the problem is everything. It's everything. If you don't solve the problem, you don't create a solution that is going to be equitable for the end consumer or for the use case or the audience that you're trying to serve. So
exactly.
Yeah.
There's not a single artist you'll interact with who is happy about the situation regarding their rights, or even understands the situation about their rights. If they are, they already work at one of these organizations, and they still not might fully understand. It's confusing. It can be made simple, and I think that's something we're set out to do.
Trevor, you should have stopped that. There is not a single artist you'll talk to that's happy.
Exactly. Well, I think the last thing I'll say about that is like the target consumer for the product, right? Like for these blockchains who are building alternative platforms to stream, they're competing for streamers. That's the consumption side, you know? Like why? That's not the problem. Like streaming music is not an issue that needs to be fixed in 2021 right now. We have access to all of these first-class platforms that work very, very well. Our target market is on the other side, is the actual people who are creating the work. So if we can fix it for them, then I think it'll help sort of bring up the baseline of the entire system.
There are also more creators every day. Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm just going to cap it on. There are more creators every day that are all being written out of the system. So if we create a solution for them, we can onboard more creators, which then creates a better ecosystem for the streaming platforms on the other side and the consumers on the other side too. So it's just like all of the incentives are aligned in the same direction, I think.
Yes, indeed. Sazurin says, how will this product interact with major streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music? Initially, it won't. So to do sort of a proof of concept, we're going to be building a marketplace that uses our backend. So that's different from the streaming platforms that are building with
Shiloh.
That's different from the streaming platforms on different blockchains that aren't doing anything to improve the backend. So in order to showcase the power and the ability of our backend, we'll be building a basic marketplace that people can sell songs, and we sort of envision a lot of cool features. So if the ownership is tokenized, you can suddenly do a lot of cool things with it. For example, if you want to support someone that you admire, someone who is just trying to get up, you can actually send part of your tokens to that person. They suddenly get 5 or 10% of the stream for your songs. So it's like lending the potential of the ownership of the asset. So like all of these cool things are just not possible now. So we intend to build a marketplace platform that showcases this. Important thing to note there is the marketplace is not the end product. The end product is the underlying stuff that enables the marketplace to hook in. So the idea there is if there is a back end for different platforms to hook into, perhaps if it gains traction, then entities like Spotify and all of these streaming platforms, they would be able to hook into it to efficiently disperse payments across different people if they wanted to. Yeah.
But that's another battle for another time in the future. We have to build the use case, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to build that back-end database that's going to be valuable and is going to create the foundation for all of these other problems that we will solve in the future.
All right, let's do one more question.
Cool.
Philip Villania says, what are the ways that your project will do to protect artists from breaching contracts or other laws to retain the rights of the artists? I understand the first part of that question, but the second part to retain the rights in the ownership. To retain the rights in the ownership. Okay, so the idea here is that when you're talking about breach of contracts, typically
nothing to do with us.
yeah, there's like a lawyer that is sort of in charge of that. And the cool thing with something like this is like the lawyer can be one of the parties that has voting power. And if all of the people within the group cast a vote, they can do what they want, right? Like if one party, if one member in the party will breach the contract, then a vote can be cast, and then something can happen. Maybe like there's an updated token distribution that will change. You know, if that person breached the contract, they no longer have the rights to that stream, and yeah, there's all sorts of ways to deal with this. But I feel like at the end of the day, contract breaches is not something that we will handle. We just have the underlying tools for the people who use it to handle. So in this case, you know, there might be a way for a vote to happen in order to update the breach of the contract. And once that goes through, maybe an updated version of a smart contract gets pushed up, and then yeah. So
we're not playing the game. Yeah. We're the referee.
Yeah.
With the receipts.
And another thing too is that we can still help in this matter because contracts, and particularly with like lawyers, are there to figure out the gray area. And what we're doing is we're actually just reducing the amount of gray area and the need that they need to be there. We're creating a lot more white and a lot more black by ironing out these very clear contracts and creating more contracts for more art, so that they, when there is a point of conflict, that they can step in and like fulfill their duties, but they don't no longer have to be a part of that initial contract setup, because our underlying contracts and setup systems are going to, we're making these as like fundamentally sound as possible. We're looking at all of the current most up-to-date standards for metadata. We're looking at all of the existing types of contracts, speaking with entertainment lawyers and like music rights contracting lawyers to kind of like figure out like what is the best, most soundproof, clear, safe way to set this up, so that in the end they're really only needed for those specific use cases. And what this also does is, by setting up these systems, having users, you know, get bound and be in control of the contract themselves, the benefit too is that this helps a lot of the other existing organizations already in this chain, these kind of middlemen or our enforcers, ASCAP, EMI. If they're not handling the payment side, if they're not handling the contract side or the percentages, they are then more free to go out on the enforcement side to collect more money from the restaurants, to be able to maybe go out and track down what institutions and how they're reporting. That middle school, high school band out in the middle of Kansas, someone could be able to interact with them, check in on them, because they are free of dealing with all this other stuff. So like that's something that excites me too, is that this we're removing them from the contracting side of things, and it's freeing them up to devote more energy into the moments when there is a specific like conflict that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like when you distill it down, like what these entities like ASCAP and like what they do is they take the money and they decide how much to split it and to whom. So something like that, like that's one of the core things that they do, and that's one example of something that doesn't have to be done by a person. You know, you're just taking an input, you're taking multiple inputs and you're doing some math on it and then output. A smart contract can do that. So by moving that to a smart contract, I think that would benefit those people as well, because suddenly they can redistribute their manpower to focus on things that cannot be done by blockchain, cannot be done by the computers. And yeah, that's like sort of what I hope to see. I really hope to see that. It's just so dumb that that they take so long, you know? It's like, what are they doing in there? They're like calculating things on a calculator or something? I have no idea.
Well, another thing too, specific to like ASCAP and BMI, because I might be incorrect on this, but like one's kind of an official like nonprofit, and then one is a for-profit but kind of functions as a nonprofit. Is just like the rest of the performing arts industry, they're underfunded in a lot of regards. So it's another problem. Like, why is it inefficient? Is because they're underfunded. They're trying to they do a pretty good job of like trying to disseminate all of the income into their equation, but it's almost as if they needed to keep with their existing infrastructure, they would have to take such a large chunk to make these improvements that it wouldn't be paying out to the artist, and so like that doesn't work either. So I think what we can do is really solve that issue, and like that's just what Icon is really well suited to do.
Think about how backwards that is. The entity that is in charge of handling the money doesn't have enough money. So how can they possibly be expected to act in everyone's best interest, right? Like if they themselves don't have money and their job is to send money to people, they're incentivized to take a big cut, right? So if all of that is being handled in a much more efficient way, you know, they might be able to keep the same amount of staff, but have all of that staff focus on tasks that technology cannot do. You know, go out to these shady high schools, you know, get their marching band, drum major, give us the money. Like that's something blockchain can't do. So very cool.
At least, yeah. Please don't come from the blockchain in about 20 years. Please don't come.
Icon Terminator. It's okay.
Icon Terminator. Here we go. All right. Did you guys have any closing thoughts?
I think that what is most exciting by Icon and this community, this idea of hyper connecting the world, is it's a use case for blockchain that I think is going to be important moving forward. Every blockchain has a different advantage, which means it's a different tool for a different job. And I think that Icon, at least for this job, is well positioned to really provide so much value because it's the right tool for the right job. And I'm so excited about that. I think that that is an aspect of cryptocurrency and blockchain that isn't being talked about or isn't being thought about yet. It's just like, oh, who's a good marketing campaign, who has a really cool token name or design or whatever. But what is this tool supposed to do for me? Yeah. And can it do it in the most efficient way possible? And so it's exciting. Ethereum is proving the use case. And I think Icon is going to prove the use case in a way that's actually economically, it makes sense for the everyday user.
Yeah.
For me, it just boils down to the community. It's what drew me into the music community. It's what's kept me there. And I can just see a lot of the parallels with what Icon is doing. They're supporting each other's projects. They're putting out all these initiatives. They're trying to make it accessible. And we're just trying to do the same for music. So I'm just excited to be a part of this process. And thanks again for everyone tuning in. And
yeah,
look forward to keeping you posted.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Sweet. Yeah. So just some closing thoughts as well. Be sure to follow Tempo on Twitter. They are Tempo ICX, and they are a P-rep. So if you would like to support the team, be sure to shift some votes over to their team as well. I'm not afraid to say it. There's so many teams out there that are doing absolutely nothing for Icon, yet they have a large percentage of the vote. So if you are voting for one of those teams that are doing nothing but selling off the rewards, please go ahead and shift some votes to a team that is actually not only building something useful, building something different. Because there's so many people building like the products for finance and things along those lines. That's important as well. But it's, I think, refreshing to see some new faces, some new people who are building something completely different. So if you liked what you see, if you like what you saw on this stream, be sure to give them a follow on Twitter, and if you can afford it, go ahead and shift some of your votes to them as well.
We appreciate any support you guys have to offer us. We're going to try to do our best to fundamentally change the way the music industry does business. So let's get it.
All right.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Drew and Trevor, and thank you for everyone for attending. We'll see you next week.